Welcome to the To Be Frank Show with Zacc and Strack. Frank Zaccanelli has been in the world of domestic and international business and professional sports for 40 years. And as a former minority owner, president, and general manager of the Dallas Mavericks, he's been asked to comment on current events and national news for most of his professional career. Sarah Strackhouse has worked as a reporter, videographer, graphic designer, anchor, and producer at Fox News, CW, CBS, NBC, and Time Warner cable stations across the country for more than 12 years. And no matter where she landed, her search was for the truth. In a time where journalistic integrity has come to be questioned, people are looking for a place to find just the facts.
Live from Dallas, Texas and the To Be Frank revamped studios. Welcome to the To Be Frank Show. I'm Zacc. This is Strack. And we're really happy to be here today. Now, for all of you live viewers, we apologize for the 30-minute delay. We had a slight technical problem that our cracked up, best you can get producer Holden fixed. And basically now we're a half hour late, but we apologize for the delay, but we hope you enjoy the show. So Sarah, we've got a lot of great news things today, but why don't you tell everybody how they get to the show, how they follow the show, and all of that.
Yeah, so if you want to see us on Facebook, if you're watching live, it's at To Be Frank Show, and then you can also search for us on YouTube, To Be Frank Show. You can also find us online, tobefrankshow.com, and then you can see all of the links there. You can watch all of our clips, all of our different segments, as well as the whole thing there. So at To Be Frank Show, To Be Frank Show, basically across the board.
Right, and so you know, we want the viewers to be able to access the show. It's really important that that's the case. And we're growing the show. After the third episode, we're really starting to gain a lot of momentum. Last year, when I did the show by myself, which I prefer the format this year, I was able to talk Sarah into coming on the show. We basically, at the end, were well over 100,000 views per episode. So we want to get there quicker, and we want to be able to build the base. And we have some really cool things that we think we can do with this show. So, but this is show 4, season 2, and we're really excited about being with you today. So Sarah, why don't we start the show?
All right. Well, normally we have our live news segment, but right now we're going to do touch on just a couple of topics, some breaking news that kind of happened yesterday and into today. First off, we want to talk about former President Bill Clinton came home from the hospital yesterday after getting an infection that ended up turning into sepsis. So luckily he did come home with antibiotics. He is okay, but we kind of just wanted to touch on that. I know a lot of people have been following that story.
Yeah, urinary tract infection that somehow got into the bloodstream. He's 75 years old. He looks to be in pretty good shape. And anytime it's an ex-president, it's huge news.
Yeah.
And I'm happy that he's out of the hospital. Probably not as happy as he is.
Right.
But I'm sure he's happy to be home, and we wish him all the best.
Yeah.
The second big news story really broke this morning, late last night and this morning. Colin Powell, the former Secretary of State, General Colin Powell, died of COVID complications. And he was an incredible statesman. He was involved with, I believe, George Herbert Walker Bush, and he was also involved with George W. Bush. He was Secretary of State under George W. Bush. He was the guy that had to go in front of the UN and basically say there were WMDs that unfortunately they never found.
Right.
And so he had a real mess with that. But as a statesman and as a general, his career was lauded by all as a great career, and he died of COVID complications, and he was vaccinated.
Yep, he was vaccinated, 84 years old, and he was the first Black U.S. Secretary of State. So also praying for him and his family, and you know, hoping he was around family at the time.
A real patriot.
Yes, for sure.
So. God bless his family, and we hope that, again, his legacy will live on. I'm sure of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, well, time now for live news. So we are talking about the Queen of England to start off.
All right, hold on. I actually have to interrupt you.
Okay.
The doctors, whoever the hell they are, have basically told the Queen, 95 years old, to stop drinking. She has her occasional martini. I'm sure she probably sneaks some scotch in there.
Right.
But she's the Queen. Leave the Queen alone.
I'm sorry, but if I were 95, and I think they're trying to do it so that she makes it to next year, her 70th year on the throne. But if I were 95, no one could tell me that I can't have my nightly martini.
But the martini's going to get her there.
Right.
It's not like it's a gigantic negative. You can't tell the Queen to stop drinking.
I mean, you couldn't tell me if I was 95 and about to be on the throne for the 70th year.
And an interesting piece to this is that my mother, who lived to 98, when she was about 94, they basically told her, listen, for 3 weeks you can't have a glass of wine. She had 2 glasses of wine every day.
Mm-hmm.
She's Italian. She just...
As Italians do.
No, she had 2 glasses of wine every day. You'd have thought they told her that they were going to take her bank account.
Did she lose it?
Lost it completely. So the Queen, 95 years old, leave the Queen alone.
I agree.
I think there are bigger issues in London than worried about the Queen's drinking habits.
I think so too. And apparently she's not even a big drinker. Apparently it's just her every so often nightly martini.
No, a martini a day, they said, or something.
Keeps the doctor away.
Keeps the doctor away. So the Queen can do what she wants.
I agree.
All right.
All right, next we're talking supply chain. And this is, the crisis continues. Last week, the White House brokered a deal that basically said that they're going to keep the ports in LA and along the coast open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But this kind of one of the issues here is that it's going to be open 60 extra hours a week. And most of these warehouses are union. So that means time and a half and a bonus overnight workers. So this is going to, shoot up the cost of goods.
Well, the transportation secretary is Pete Buttigieg. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I say that name right
Buttigieg.
or not. Okay. Mayor Pete is much easier. Okay. So he was the mayor of South Bend. Mm-hmm. He ran for president. He didn't really get a lot of traction. I have a thing with mayors, that they're not that qualified most of the time. I call them rubber chicken mayors. Mm-hmm. They go to a lot of dinners, they give speeches, it's all the stuff, but they're not really that qualified.
Right.
I'm not saying Pete Buttigieg is qualified or not qualified, but this falls into the category, Sarah, for me again. The Biden administration's messaging is so bad. Let me tell you what he said. He says that the supply chain crisis will continue in the next year. But he doesn't really give any tangible reasons about what they're doing to make sure that doesn't happen. What he says is the bottleneck, and this is where I have a problem, is being spurred in part by the amount of demand brought on by President Biden's economic recovery. Now, I know that's not completely right.
Yeah.
During the Trump administration, and on the show, we're not political, we're not sticking up for Trump, we're not sticking up for Biden, but under the Trump administration, we had very low unemployment, the economy was booming, and we never heard about these things. Mm-hmm. This is a byproduct of COVID, mm-hmm. and it's a worldwide problem, as I mentioned last time, Sarah, and I Unplugged. It's a worldwide problem. And more importantly than anything, it's being caused by a lack of truck drivers that we're going to get to, okay, in this show. We're going to talk about that. But to say and try to promote the fact that this is all because the economy is roaring, that's not the case that I see. Is it the case that you see?
No, not at all. In fact, I was listening to a Fox News podcast recently that was talking about how initially this came because when everything shut down during COVID, obviously e-commerce did shoot up, demand did shoot up as far as ordering stuff online. And a lot of our goods are obviously coming from China, from Shanghai. So when the issue became when people in Shanghai got COVID, they shut down the entire factory. So these factories, not only are they supposed to be working overtime because of all of the, extra high demand, or not necessarily supposed to be, but they're needing to be in order to fill that demand, then they're shutting down, which in turn puts them behind even farther. So when these big, ships come over from Shanghai, then they're just sitting at the port because there aren't, it's not like they've added more employees to the warehouses sometimes, and especially they're all union based, so there's only so many people can hire without going bankrupt for these warehouses.
And it's the back end distribution
and it's the
side
back end
too,
distribution,
with
yes.
the trucking and everything else.
It's not just the economy and, it's
have,
everything.
Yeah, we have a tape. Can we roll the tape?
We actually, I think we decided to not forego that tape.
So we don't have the tape.
Yes.
All right. Then I just want to say, as kind of a close to this, that the issue is an imaging, messaging issue by the Biden administration. I've been on this from the beginning when we started season 2 of the show. I just think it's terrible imaging for him not to give specific things that they are doing to solve the truck driving issue, to solve the port issue. And as I said, in the port issue, Biden did a very smart thing by extending the hours.
He did, but I feel like exactly what you're saying. He didn't continue to answer questions about who's paying for all of those extra hours. Or, the federal funding isn't coming down for these warehouses. They're all union based. So exactly what you're saying. He didn't answer the rest of the questions. You can't just say, okay, everything's open, go.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we get into, in this subject, vaccine mandates. Do they have an issue as it relates to the workforce in terms of mandates? And we're going to get into that a little bit with the police. So this is an ongoing issue. It's really a big issue, though, because of all the issues that we talk about. When we talk about the border in Afghanistan, people feel terrible about that, but not everyone's affected.
Right.
Everyone's affected by this.
Go to your grocery store.
Everyone's affected by this. So we'll keep an eye on this one, and I think this is an important issue.
Absolutely, and get your Christmas presents in early.
Go buy them now.
Yes, go get them now, exactly. All right, we are talking policies at the southern border. So recently, last week, Biden was talking about the Title 42 expulsions. So those are continuing. Under Trump, they were basically saying it's a part of the health code saying that it allows the government to prevent the introductions of individuals during certain public health emergencies. So he was trying to let it expire this summer, and then a judge stopped it, and now they're putting it back in place, basically trying to clean up the border.
Well, one of the mistakes that the Biden administration, I believe, has made, I've talked some about with Afghanistan, you don't set artificial deadlines.
Right.
You also don't go in and say, we're going to reverse everything that our predecessor did. That's not smart business. It's not smart politics. I understand that they wanted to do that, because they wanted to have a show of force to say, we're now in charge now.
Right.
But it hasn't worked out properly. We do have tape on this one.
We do.
Roll the tape.
The new guidelines are supposed to limit deportations to just those who recently crossed the border or who are some type of national security threat. Is this a good step? Is this in the right direction for you?
Good morning, TJ and Amy. Great to be with you. Listen, President Biden and Vice President Harris were elected by a historic number of voters who rejected the anti-immigrant policies of the last administration and supported President Biden's vision for a 21st century immigration system that recognizes that immigrants are a strength to our nation, that immigrants are essential to who we are as a nation. And these most recent guidelines that were issued fall woefully short of President Biden's promises to change our system because they provide too much discretion to immigration agents who have a long history, a culture of unaccountability and violations of civil rights.
The tape, I think, talks a lot about, the current situation down there. But here are some facts. U.S. Customs and Border Patrol rescued over 11,800 migrants and reportedly nearing 500 dead near the border. This is a dangerous situation, okay? Forget about, the fact that people are coming across the border, they're getting across without any kind of, situation where they're being checked, they're coming across unvaccinated. Forget about all that. this has become, Sarah, a very dangerous situation down at the border. And I get back to the same thing that I was talking about earlier, is don't make preconceived ideas about what you're going to do until you get your hands on a deal. I'll give you a great example. I've been in the business world long enough where we've taken over companies and we automatically say to ourselves, well, we're going to fix this. We don't even know what we're fixing until we get in and try to figure it out. We don't make any preconceived ideas. Politics is different, and I believe that's been a mistake on the border for the Biden administration.
Yeah, no, I agree, because he made all these promises going in, and now he's either, it's one of two things. Either, you know, this judge really said that they can open back up and he's not sure what he's supposed to be doing. And then second off, you know, he's realizing, oh, maybe there was a reason why this Title 42 was in place. And just piggybacking off of your statistic, the 500,000 or the 500 deaths near the border, that's the highest since 2005.
Yeah.
So it's getting out of hand.
It's not a good situation. And again, forget what we think for the moment. Quinnipiac, which is a very, very well thought of poll, has the Biden administration's approval numbers on the border in the 20s. Okay, so this is not something where we're trying to be political again. We're not picking on Joe Biden. What we're doing is trying to give people the information. And, you know, just as a businessman, don't make decisions before you totally understand exactly what the ramifications are. You know?
Yeah, well, and he made all these promises, exactly like what you're saying. He made all these promises when he was getting into office, and now his own party is upset with him because he's not sticking to that because of exactly what you're saying. He said all this stuff, and then when he's in office, he's realizing, or maybe he's realizing, or just not, you know, not able to reverse everything.
Well, and you know, to close on this subject, the Democratic Party is fractured now between the far left and the moderate Democrats. But at the same time, the Republican Party's not just blowing and going either.
There's extremes.
You've got the Trump factor that's out there, and then you have the more moderate factor inside the Republican Party. So both parties, not just the Democrats, both parties, I believe there's fracturing that's going on. I mean, take a look at Trump's relationship with Mitch McConnell. It's not good.
Right, not at all. And there's opposing sides on both ends of the spectrum, but the extremes, I think, are really, unfortunately, a lot of times the most vocal.
And we're going to get in with one of the segments on the Democrats and even more fracturing potentially in a segment that we have later in the show.
Yeah.
So.
All right, well, elections coming up at the beginning of November, and one of the biggest races, a number of really big races in Virginia. And you have personal ties.
Well, I do.
Yeah.
And in full disclosure, I know Governor Terry McAuliffe very well. Virginia is one of the places, I think the only place, I can't find another one, where a governor can't serve consecutive terms. So you are governor for 4 years, you're then not governor, and then if you want to be governor again, you run 4 years later.
You have to run again.
Yeah, and so this is becoming what the press is playing up to be a bellwether, you know, this is going to tell the tale about, you know, the Biden administration and Trump's poll and all this other stuff. I have a little bit of a different view I'm going to give. We have tape on this?
We do.
Roll the tape.
Glenn Youngkin is a great gentleman. I hope Glenn gets in there and he'll do all of the things that we want a governor to do.
I was honored to receive President Trump's endorsement.
Welcome back. Well, that's part of a new ad that the Virginia Democratic gubernatorial candidate Terry McAuliffe is currently airing, aiming to capitalize on some remarks former President Trump made this week in support of Glenn Youngkin, the Republican nominee. Youngkin didn't sanction the event that the former president spoke at, but he's caught in the political bind many Republicans find themselves in these days, needing support, as Youngkin likes to put it, from the forever Trumpers and the never Trumpers in order to win, especially in an increasingly blue state like Virginia. McAuliffe has already run that ad that I just showed you 30 times in Northern Virginia, as it seems he thinks his best chance at winning lies in galvanizing voters who turned out against the former president in the D.C. suburbs. Well, there's a reason for that. Let me just show you by the numbers why this is so important. What's great about Terry McAuliffe's race this year is we have his 2013 race just know about. He won that one. It was very close, less than 3 points. His victories, his margins in Arlington County, 49, nearly 50%. Fairfax, he won it by 22. Ken Cuccinelli was from Fairfax County. And Alexandria won it by 49 points. Now let me show you what happened with President Biden in these counties and overall. He won Virginia by 10. Look at his margins in Arlington, by another 14 points higher than what McAuliffe did in 13, nearly double in Fairfax. And look at this, another 13 points higher in Alexandria.
So Terry McAuliffe, in my humble opinion, was a good governor his first term. And again, I have to qualify. I'm friends with Terry McAuliffe. Terry and I grew up in the same upstate New York City. We went to rival high schools, all of that. Trump and Biden, here's the thing here. Trump and Biden are equally unpopular for different reasons in Virginia. Biden beat Trump by, I think, 10 points. And when he beat him, that was based on a new agenda, a new policy. There's no question that Afghanistan has hurt Biden in Virginia. The border has hurt Biden in Virginia, and all these related issues. President Barack Obama is now going to go to Virginia and campaign with Terry. The issue really has come down to, though, Terry had not a great shining moment during the debates where education was brought up, and Terry made a comment that I don't know if he wanted to take back, not take back, but he said to the equivalent of schools should run the schools and parents should not be involved. I don't think he meant that. And now what's happened, and you can speak to this, this whole critical race theory issue has now raised its head, and I think there's several sides to this.
Well, I mean, education, and the Republican candidate has kind of put education in the forefront of what he's specifically running on. But I think the education is such a big topic, especially in Virginia, because you see all of these parents that are at these school board meetings. I mean, they've been in the media nearly daily, you know, police getting involved, and it's just a huge topic for, and I agree, I don't think I can't speak for him, obviously, but I don't think he also meant to say that, because obviously everyone's involved in their kids' schooling. But I think you know, I've spoken to a congressional candidate, and she was saying that, you know, while it may not be mandated in the school system, critical race theory is being taught. And I think that's some of the issues is that.
All right, but let me say, everything I've been able to determine, it is not sponsored by the state.
By the state.
The state's curriculum does not call for critical race theory.
Right.
And we can get into the whole critical race theory more and more and more. You know, there's a whole 3 shows on that.
Yes.
But in defense of Terry McAuliffe, the state is not pushing this down the throats of the students. It's not mandated as it, I think, is or might be in New York, in California,
right. In the curriculum
in other places,
per se.
In the curriculum per se. And all I can say to this is that this is going to be a real interesting next couple of weeks, because the election's on November 2nd. In the latest poll, Terry is up 51 to 46. So
it's close.
It's right outside the margin of error. You know, my position is in later shows getting closer to the election, I want to make a endorsement of some kind. This is not the show, but this is becoming a big, hotly contested race.
Especially in Virginia, because this has the opportunity to possibly swing seats in the House.
Correct.
I mean, that could be huge
and
for.
And maybe in 2024, swing Virginia back to the Republicans.
Yep. So, I mean, who knows? I'm very curious to see how this race goes.
Yeah. So we'll keep up on this. And like I said, I will be making more of a formal announcement about how I feel about this in a later show. But the media seems very, very entrenched with this now.
Yes.
So you're going to see a lot about this.
Yes, especially when it comes to all these school board meetings that the parents are extremely vocal at.
Right.
So.
Okay.
All right, we're moving on to COVID vaccine mandates. I mean, this is something that we've talked about show after show. Unfortunately, there's been a lot of news now with a lot of people quitting, being fired. We talked about all of the nurses in the last show in New York. You know, NBC reports that 40% of TSA agents have not reported their vaccine status. This is with their deadline just a week away. So, of course, this could affect air travel. Police in Chicago and Seattle are talking about not coming to school, about not coming to work because of the vaccine mandate. And then most recently, an ESPN reporter, Allison Wilson, actually just came out and said, you know, she's also leaving, and we have tape of that.
Yeah, why don't we roll that tape?
So I have been denied my request for accommodation by ESPN and the Walt Disney Company, and effective next week, I will be separated from the company. First of all, thank you, everyone who reached out and texted, emailed, called, messaged me. I can't tell you how much light it brought in a really dark and difficult time. And I've also had a lot of people, and women in particular, reach out and share their stories.
You know, I'm just against mandates of any kind. I'm also a guy, though, that believes that it's commonsensical to get the vaccine. I mean, I am really at a point, you know, I'm old enough that it all makes sense to me. Again, if I was 25 or 30 years old, would it make that much sense to me? Probably not as much as it makes now. I'm vaccinated. I'm getting the booster as soon as it's out with Moderna. The long and short of it is it makes sense to me. But these mandates are causing problems, Sarah.
Yep.
And I don't know what the answer is. I mean, because it just seems to me like the Biden administration continues to do these things that ultimately aren't as popular as they really should be in order to get the Biden administration numbers up. Yeah. I've said over and over, his numbers are no time to throw a party for anybody. They're bad.
Yep.
It's not good for the country.
Well, and I think he's overreaching. That's one of the biggest things. I think he's trying to insert government where I believe it does not belong, in the private sector. The CEO of Delta just said that he's not going to mandate that his employees get the vaccine. So I think that exactly what you're saying, him continuing to insert his administration into every part of private business in the country, people are going to start speaking up. They already are. People are going to start going against it, which is going to cause even more division.
Yeah. So, you know, this is going to be with us now for a while, and we're obviously going to cover it more on our show. But Sarah, you know, this doesn't also bode well for the administration because it's so controversial.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. All right, time now for Double Take. All right, of course, just if you're just joining us for Double Take, we take 5 subjects and we have 2 minutes to talk about it. There's even a buzzer, and we'll kind of go back and forth on each of the subjects. Sometimes we agree, sometimes we don't. So our first subject is the Supreme Court seats, to add seats or not to add seats.
Go ahead.
All right, so before, it's 9 right now, right? It's been 9 since 1869, and there's some congressional Democrats that are pushing to make it 13. Now, I do not think that's necessary. I do not think that's right. Even Biden has said he doesn't believe that it's something he needs to push. Even Nancy Pelosi said that she has no plans to bring it to the floor. I mean, I don't think, I understand that they're unhappy with the 6-3 sway Republican right now, but I still don't think that's a reason to add more seats.
Well, it's obvious to me it's a terrible idea. Just a couple of things. You know, there are Democrats both in the House and in the Senate that have proposed legislation to do this. Now, I think that Speaker Pelosi is smart enough not to take the bait. Biden has not taken the bait, so it's not going to go anywhere.
Right.
But the whole concept of this, I'll give you the biggest statistic. 26% of the people agree this is a good idea, which leaves 74% of the people that doesn't think it's a good idea. So that's the real governor as it relates to this. If we start now politically starting to change the whole construct of our government because a certain party is in control, we're going to put ourselves in a really bad situation, I think, in the future. It's the same thing as the filibuster, okay? If you really want to bust that up, and you want to do something, watch out what you wish for, because the next time that the other party is involved, in control,
they'll add
then
3 more seats.
You're going to get stuff, shoved down your throat. It just isn't a good policy.
I agree, and I think people are upset that that President Trump was able to name 3 people in 4 years, but that's just how the cookie crumbled.
It laid out that
just
way.
how it happened. It's not like the Republicans planned for this. Even the late Ginsburg said that shouldn't have been, that they shouldn't have added the extra seats.
Yeah,
so.
it's just guys, a terrible idea. It's not going to go anywhere, but it's at least worth covering on the show.
I agree.
That there is a movement here.
Yeah, and it's supposed to be presented on Thursday, so
Okay.
we'll see. All right, moving along, Jussie Smollett, his case was dropped. He wanted to have a dismissal for his criminal case after the hoax, the racial hoax that, he said that there were racial slurs and physical attack on him ended up being false. He wanted his case dismissed, his criminal case, and a judge said, no, we're pushing forward.
All right, we'll give you 30 seconds of this unplugged. Go ahead.
All right, I think that is absolutely ridiculous that he wanted to even get it dismissed, because first off, he went on record and talked to the police saying that people were throwing acid on his face, and he hired 2 people to go and create this racial and homophobic slur against him.
Paid him $350
Paid
each.
them, and on top of that, also dragged President Trump's name into it. It had them yell MAGA at him. And for him then to waste the city's resources and police searching for these people, all these people were, I'm behind Smollett. And then we've come to find out that it's all fake, and he's just doing it to raise issues, just to get notoriety. I mean, I think he should be criminally prosecuted to the most extent of the law.
And he is. And this is really not defendable. And again, this is not Republican, Democrat. There's complete unity within the population that this guy really screwed up.
Yep.
And what he did, in an attempt to help himself, he completely killed his career.
Yep.
I mean, this was all...
He was a big star on Empire.
This was an intent to basically enhance his career. You want to talk about a miscalculation.
Yep.
And again, these 2 brothers who have now turned state's evidence were paid to do this. And the issue that Jussie Smollett has is he lied to the police.
Yep.
And when you lie to the police on the record, there's a record of that. And they've checked all this out, and unfortunately, you want to know what? It's a big mess.
Yep, and I'm happy that the judge didn't let it drop.
Yeah, so judge didn't let it drop, no buzzer. We actually had...
We agreed and on time.
Yeah, we actually did. All right, save the buzzer, Holden. Next one.
All right, next one. We're talking about 18-year-olds getting behind the wheel of an 18-wheeler. So in California, there is a class, Patterson High School, I believe it is, that is talking about... let me double check that. Patterson High School, yes, in California, they're offering to seniors to learn how to become a truck driver.
Yeah. Well, my last unplugged show, when I did the unplugged, was about this border or the port thing and lack of truck drivers.
Yeah.
Anything that solves the truck driving problem. I don't know what 18 years old has to do with the fact if an 18-year-old is qualified and he can drive a truck, that 18-year-old, as I mentioned last time on the Unplugged, I mentioned that it's a good living.
It can be, yeah.
It's somewhere between $55,000 and $75,000, not including overtime.
Right.
So if it solves part of the problem in this distribution mess we're in, it gets 18-year-olds to work quicker, they can make a good living, I don't see anything wrong with this at all.
No, and so 68,000 is the number of truck drivers needed for 2021. Truck drivers carry more than 72% of the freight by weight. So we are so behind on needing truck drivers.
68,000, I did not know that.
68,000 truck drivers are needed in the year of 2021.
That's a big problem.
It's a big problem. And my only qualm with this, because
Do you have a problem with this?
A little bit of one. It's just that if you're 18, then you've been behind the wheel for what, a year, 2 years? I think it's generally why when you're behind the wheel of an 18-wheeler, you have so much power, and it's a harder vehicle to drive. When you've only been driving for 2 years, I think experience comes into play a little bit. So that's my only hesitation about this, and that's, I think, in general, why usually truck drivers are older. They have more experience. They understand how to handle something this big with this much responsibility on the road.
All right, but let me just say, I drive on freeways up and down the toll road almost every day. Half the people that I come in contact with shouldn't have a driver's license.
I mean, I couldn't agree more.
I mean, are you kidding?
I know.
So,
the only hesitation.
If it solves the issue of this massive problem we have at the ports, I'm for it, provided they're qualified.
Agreed.
Okay.
Agreed. All right, so we are talking about the home shortage. It is across the country. Frank, I'm gonna let you take this one away.
I got a huge problem with this one. I am in the midst, for a family member, of trying to get a house either bought or leased in Dallas, Texas. Now, I've been in the same mode in Miami. I've been in the same mode in Los Angeles during this COVID meltdown situation. I've said a couple of times that because of COVID and because of some of these shortages, in Dallas, Texas now, this is really important, $1 million home pre-COVID is now $1.4 million. Same house. So that tells you a little bit about these inflationary things that we're dealing with. In today's world, though, there's a rigged game going on. There's not a lot of inventory. And I'll tell you what I've experienced. Realtors are pricing these homes a little less than they should, below appraisal, so that they can create a frenzy on a bidding war scenario where the realtors are blatantly saying, no house is going to sell for what we listed for. Well, that's a problem. I believe that to be unethical. I mean, that's a huge problem. And in Dallas, sometimes there's 7 to 10 contracts today. The market is not slowing down. And realtors are telling people, well, you make a full price offer on a house, okay? You make a full price offer on a house. Well, everyone knows it's going to sell for more than that. Well, why don't you price it? Because what they're trying to do is they're trying to create this auction process.
The bidding war.
And I think it's terrible.
And it's, I'm trying to think about it from the point of view, if I were the homeowner, I mean, I would want that done, but I feel like that I would have a really hard time getting behind that as someone who's trying to buy them.
Sarah, people are sending testimonials in about their family and how bad they want the house, and they're showing pictures of their kids.
Yeah.
This is how desperate this thing has become. So I only say the realtor relationships, and I've been in that business for over 40 years. What's going on right now is wrong. It's bordering being unethical, and I think the Real Estate Commission should step in and take a look at it.
That's interesting. We'll have to follow this one for sure. All right, we are talking about police and the vaccine, and I know your Unplugged has to do with defund the police, so kind of talking about this specifically, it has to do with the vaccine. Right now, police in Chicago and Seattle are threatening not to go to work, and
why don't you start off on this one?
I was going to say, so I think that right now, with the defund police movement in place in so many places, there are so many people who are not going in to become police officers because they're, maybe afraid to go out there and afraid to be in a situation that they might make a mistake. So first off, a lot of cities are seeing a lack of police officers. And then this vaccine mandate, I think I've seen a lot of police saying that they're not going to get the vaccine. So on top of that, in Seattle and Chicago, places where police are really needed, if they're saying they're not coming to work, I mean, if this is happening across the country, I mean, mayhem's going to break out.
Yeah, and I'm going to handle the Unplugged, Sarah, on this, but I made a few notes on this. Across the United States, mostly in major cities, the police are really clashing now with the city authorities, and they're filing lawsuits against having to take the vaccine. And it's just not a really good scenario, especially coming off of the situation that we had with the very unfortunate death of George Floyd and all the backlash that went along with that. I think it's a real problem, but we lost a lot of police officers to retirement, early retirement, based on that scenario. Now, what is this going to cause?
And I think on top of that, police officers or the city, I don't know who is going to have to fund this, but in order to stay at the police station, they're going to have to submit semi-weekly negative tests in order to, or else they're going to have to be put on unpaid.
Well, this gets back to over the 100 employees, you got to take tests, right? And I've said repeatedly, the testing thing is a big problem.
It's going to cost too much
expensive.
money.
It's really expensive. So, you know, it really segues in to my Unplugged. So let's do my Unplugged. And I think then, Sarah, we can really talk and bring this whole thing together.
I agree.
Okay. The Fund the Police vote in Minneapolis, Minnesota, November the 2nd. It is question 2 on the ballot. All right? So for all of you that live in Minneapolis, you're very familiar with this. For those of you that don't live in Minneapolis, you're also somewhat familiar with this, but I'm going to get into some detail about what the broader scope of this really means for the Democratic Party and for some of the initiatives that the Democratic Party is pursuing. The issue really here is the bill is set up to dismantle and defund the current police department of Minneapolis, replacing it with the Department of Public Safety, which would exert public safety functions through a comprehensive public health approach to be determined by the mayor and the council. Now, somebody's going to have to explain what the hell that means, okay? Because this is not the direction that I believe the city of Minneapolis or any other city needs to be going. Let's go back. In my first show, I was a completely appalled news person on the death of George Floyd. That was one of the worst scenarios that I ever witnessed in my entire life, on tape, on television, watching that poor man die needlessly, okay? I took an incredibly hard position on that, and I maintain that position today. Derek Chauvin is now in jail, and it's exactly where he needs to be based on the conduct that he had. But there was an incredible overreaction that I talked about as it relates to this whole thing. When it first started out, these were protesters. These were African Americans and others that were protesting police brutality. And I was 100% behind it. But what ended up happening is rogue forces got involved, Antifa, and I hate to say it, Black Lives Matter is a concept that makes a lot of sense, but it's a poorly run association. And I've given all the reasons for that, you know, through the course of my shows. But the issue really here is that to defund the police now and put in, quote unquote, a public safety council run by the mayor and the city council. They can't run anything. Have we not proven that mayors have a hard time running anything? Billy D. de Blasio, worst mayor in the history of mayors, history of world existence, okay? Then you've got the Summer of Love mayor up in I believe, Seattle. And then you got my guy in Portland who, you know, is embracing all these crazies, and then they go attack him at his house. You know, there has to be law and order, and the law and order portion of it really protects the minority communities more than they protect the non-minority communities. And you've got now a divergence with this, and I'm gonna give a couple statistics. The best known progressives that are for this bill are the very controversial Ilhan Omar and Keith Ellison, who is the Attorney General of the state of Minnesota, okay? They're for this bill, for this ballot 2, question 2, to just defund the police. Now, here's the good part of our democracy. Against is Senator Amy Klobuchar, violently against, okay, who ran for president, and I have a lot of respect for as a former prosecutor, but a very, very smart senator. And Governor Tim Walz, who strongly opposes this. So there's moderate Democrat, involvement. And for those of you that didn't see my first shows, I grew up in a household that were Kennedy Democrats. So I understand this moderate Democrat scenario probably better than most, right? But the fact that there's a diversion now between the extreme far left and some of these moderates now has brought into question, how does this play out in the 2022 midterms, and how does it play out in 2024? This is not good for the Democratic Party. I'd like to see the Democratic Party get on more solid footing, because we need two parties that are debating our democracy, okay? That's hugely important. But when you see what's going on here, you could start to see now, assume this passes, which I don't believe it's going to pass. The mess that the Democrats would have on their hands for the midterms, it would be a landslide, because you could just see the ads that would come out on this. If it doesn't pass, then there's going to be a question about, the Democrats are fractured, which they are, and the Republicans are fractured, which they are. But for the Democrats on this issue, Sarah, it's a no-win. Mm-hmm. This is a no-win. And this is one of the, I'm very passionate about the fact that we need better police officers. We need better trained police officers. I think we need to get more background checks with these police officers, know what we're dealing with. Yeah. A racist police officer is the worst thing I can think of. And they're out there.
Yeah.
And you got to call out the ones that shouldn't be there. But at the same time, the whole defund the police thing, in my lifetime, I don't know that there's 5 things dumber than that.
I agree. And I also think, like, along the lines of what you were saying, shouldn't you put more money into the police entities in order to train them better if you're looking for better police?
Well, can you explain to me this whole public safety department? What the hell are they going to do?
I'm sorry, but if there's a domestic violence issue, or there's someone at my door with a gun,
well, how about there's a guy with a gun? I'm going to call out a psychiatrist that's going to come try to talk him down.
Exactly. I'm sorry, but I would rather a policeman with a gun show up at my door.
But I don't understand. No one's really explained to me what the Department of Public Safety is going to do in these situations.
Well, I don't think they have an exact plan, because first off, I truly don't think many people can believe that this is going to pass, but they have not thought this through, in my opinion. I agree with everything you're saying. I don't think this is something that can really push forward and be sustainable in our everyday lives.
The minority community needs this more than anybody.
Yep.
Again, what happened with George Floyd and others, it's not just George Floyd, there was a list of these things that are wrong. And we've got to prosecute these people, and we've got to call our police forces out to basically come to the conclusion that we're purging this thing to the point that policemen who shouldn't be policemen should be out of there.
Well, and unfortunately, and I'm not saying that this is okay, but there's going to be bad eggs in every single facet of life. In every industry, there's people who are bad or unethical, and unfortunately, in the police situation, especially the healthcare system similarly, right. If you're a bad egg, you have a gun on your head. So I know it's more extreme.
But here's my problem. I've not heard of any doctor saying, I'm going to treat white people, but black people, I'm going to give them the wrong medicine.
I mean, not anymore, but you heard about, back in the 70s, everything that was going on with syphilis and doctors treating people
That's
poorly.
a good one.
But, and, you know, think about the Dr. Dunch podcast here in Dallas. I mean, there was a man who was operating,
Right.
but again, that kind of goes to the point, there's going to be bad eggs in every scenario, but you can't just completely wipe out doctors or wipe out police because of one bad egg.
And in closing on this subject, I think what I'm seeing in Washington are the far left progressives like Ilhan Omar and Ellison and AOC and all these people. They are wrecking the Biden agenda. They're really wrecking the agenda. And that's what I see. And the fact of the matter is, the Democrats have a real tiger by the tail here. They've really got to try to figure this out. But I think that this vote, good or bad, doesn't help them in the 2022 midterms.
I just hope it doesn't pass.
I don't think it will. We're going to keep a close eye on this one. Okay.
All right. Time now for your headlines in under 5 minutes. Well, the supply chain crisis continues. Last week, the White House brokered a deal with a number of California ports to stay open 24/7 in order to deal with in order to allow the backlog of ships with goods from Shanghai to be unloaded. Fox News reports that the backlog started from an increase in e-commerce during the start of shutdowns from coronavirus, and supply decreased as factories in China closed when someone did test positive for the coronavirus. Experts say the ports being open longer will increase the cost of goods since most warehouses have employees with unions. And more people across the country are quitting with Biden's vaccine mandate in place. NBC reports 40% of TSA agents have not reported their vaccine status with their deadline a week away. Police in Chicago and Seattle are threatening not to go to work with the mandate in place. In the Windy City, police who don't submit semi-weekly negative tests will be placed on unpaid leave. An ESPN reporter, Allison Williams, quit, saying Disney denied her request for an exemption, and the Delta CEO just announced that they will not be requiring their employees to be vaccinated. And following up on the oil spill along the California coastline, the Coast Guard says a 1,200-foot ship dragged the oil pipeline across the seafloor months ago, which may have caused the oil leak in the ocean. They are still investigating if another ship came by that could have actually caused the leak once it was dragged. The ship is owned by Dordelis Finance Corporation, and according to NPR, the culprit of the leak could face criminal charges or civil penalties. And a judge has denied Jussie Smollett's request for dismissal after being charged with a hate crime hoax 2 years ago. NBC reports the Empire actor is accused of hiring people to perform a fake racist and homophobic crime against him in 2019 and lying about it to law enforcement. Smollett was charged with felony disorderly conduct for allegedly making a false report to Chicago police. And right up your alley with professional sports, Frank, the Chicago Sky won their first ever championship yesterday. They beat the Phoenix Mercury 80-74 in Game 4. The Sky were trailing much of the game with 5 minutes left and 5 points down. They made a comeback.
Well, it's good for women's sports in general. The WNBA is really a good league now.
Yeah.
I played college basketball outside of being involved in the NBA. And during my days of coming out of college basketball, men's college basketball, there were some women, you know, that were playing, and nowhere near what it is today.
Right.
But they were playing, and the quality was not great back in the day. But today, you watch these games, they are very talented athletes. They're very well-trained athletes. And it's a good sport, and I'm really happy for that. The pay has got to catch up.
Yeah.
You know, there's a whole issue with, you know, women's sports pay.
I can get into soccer and into a deep conversation.
Well,
with
really
soccer.
quickly, what about women's soccer and what's happened?
So with women's soccer, there was the whole fight with the union about trying to get higher pay for women because
But wasn't there a guy doing the wrong thing? Was there something to do with abusing the players or something?
So that situation, I'd have to read to go back into the details because I remember that happened a few months ago. He stepped down and gave the general manager, I believe, gave the general manager position to someone else who also, in the players' eyes, did not deserve it.
Yeah.
So there's a kind of a whole issue going on with that. But as far as pay goes, it's a constant fight.
Yeah. And again, you know, what's happening in women's sports across the spectrum is great.
Yeah.
You know, I've got 2 little granddaughters now. I'm so happy that they're going to be able to pick and choose.
Yep.
You know, in my day, you were a cheerleader.
Yeah.
You know, and Title IX, I believe it was. I think it was Title IX that came along and actually then said, hey, you know, these young girls now need the ability to be able to play sports.
Right.
And so, you know, we've come a long way. We have a long way to go on the pay side, but getting back to the WNBA, these are very talented athletes.
Yep. Well, I always think about my first soccer game that I went to. I can't remember if it was the World Cup or the Olympics in 1998, and I watched Mia Hamm play, Brianna Scurry, Michelle Akers, you know, the OG soccer girls, soccer women, professionals.
And the truth is you played in college, right?
Yeah, I played in college, and then I played semi-pro for a little bit, but you know, it's a different game now. I agree. I mean, I think
faster?
That much faster, and people are pushed to different limits. I mean, I'm not taking anything away from the Brandi Chastains of the world. You know, they paved the way, and they were incredible athletes. A lot of them still are. You know, Julie Foudy, Christine Lilly, all of them. But I think every year professional sports gets better and better.
Well, I think the story is, again, you know, that women are playing a key role now.
Yeah.
You know, in sports in general, especially in professional sports. So congratulations to the Sky.
Yes, the Chicago Sky.
All right.
Love it.
Well, I guess that's it.
Yeah.
Sarah, again, tell everybody how they get to the show.
Yep, so tobefrankshow.com, and then also at tobefrankshow if you're talking about Facebook. Look up on YouTube, To Be Frank Show. You can also just go to tobefrankshow.com, click all of the stuff we have there.
Yeah, watch the show, and we're really excited about doing the show.
Yeah.
And we're growing the show, and we'll keep everyone posted with that Mondays and Thursdays. So we do the show twice a week. So for this Monday edition, be safe, take care of your families, spend some time with your families, and we'll see you on Thursday.
All right, see you then.